Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to all our listeners across the globe. I truly hope you are all doing well and staying grounded in these turbulent times. Before we dive into the data that is shaking the global markets today, I want to ask you to take a deep breath. We are living through history, and your presence here, seeking clarity amidst the noise, is what keeps this channel alive. If you value this independent financial analysis, please hit that like button and subscribe. It is the only way to ensure this message reaches those who need to protect their future. Now look at your screen. This is the visual that is haunting the halls of power this morning. It is not just a policy failure. It is a mathematical certainty that the world has finally reached its breaking point. For decades, the American dollar and its diplomatic shadow were the undisputed law of the land. But as of today, January 30th, 2026, that shield has not just cracked, it has shattered. We are witnessing the birth of a trillion-dollar mistake. A strategic blunder so massive that it is making the Great Recession look like a minor market correction. The global backlash isn't coming. It is already here, and it is unstoppable because it isn't being led by politicians in suits, but by the invisible hand of a world that has decided it no longer needs the American middlemen. Imagine the weight of this moment. For 80 years, the Bretton Woods system provided a safety net for the American lifestyle, allowing us to export our inflation and import cheap goods. That era ended this morning at 4 o'clock a.m. Eastern Time when the first massive liquidation orders hit the screens in Tokyo and Zurich. This is the trillion-dollar mistake because it represents the permanent loss of trust, a commodity that cannot be printed by the Federal Reserve or recovered with a single election. The arrogance of assuming the world had no alternative has led us to this precipice. Now the alternative has arrived, and it is priced in gold, yuan, and digital assets that the Federal Reserve cannot control or manipulate. This is a personal turning point for every investor, every worker, and every family. The question is no longer if things will change, but how fast you can adapt before the walls close in on the old system. We are seeing the death of a consensus that kept the world stable, and in its place, a chaotic, multipolar reality where the United States is being treated as a systemic risk rather than a safe haven. The numbers coming out of the Asian and European markets in the last 4 hours are nothing short of catastrophic for the U.S. Treasury. We are seeing a coordinated liquidation of dollar-denominated assets that defies every traditional economic model. This is the trillion-dollar mistake in real time. President Trump's latest executive maneuvers, intended to fortify the domestic economy through aggressive tariffs and isolationist credit policies, have instead triggered a survival reflex across the globe. From the massive port of Rotterdam to the high-tech hubs of Shenzhen, the message is clear. The era of American exceptionalism is being billed at a price the U.S. taxpayer cannot afford to pay. Marketing experts and high-level economists are calling this the sovereign Bud Light moment. It is a total brand collapse on a national scale. When you weaponize your currency, you don't just hurt your enemies. You terrify your friends, and terrified friends quickly find new places to keep their money. The liquidity drain we are seeing right now is a silent vacuum, sucking the lifeblood out of our pension funds and our infrastructure projects. It is a slow-motion car crash involving every major corporation on the S&P 500, from Apple to J.P. Morgan. These institutions rely on seamless global capital flows, and those flows have just hit a concrete wall of resentment. The complexity of modern supply chains means that a mistake in Washington manifests as a shortage in Kansas or a factory closure in Ohio. We are talking about the total disruption of the just-in-time delivery system that defines modern life. The sheer scale of the capital flight is unprecedented. We have seen more than $400 billion exit the U.S. bond market in a single trading session. This isn't a glitch, it is an exodus. It is the world saying enough. The economic history books will point to this week as the moment when the American consumer lost their status as the global priority. We are becoming an economic island, and the bridges are being dismantled by the very allies we once took for granted. The cost of financing our national debt is about to skyrocket, and the burden of this trillion-dollar error will fall squarely on the shoulders of the next 3 generations of American citizens. Think about your own life for a second. Think about the products you use, the investments you've made, and the security you've worked so hard to build. That security relies on a world that trusts the American system to be the adult in the room. But what happens when that trust evaporates overnight? Paul Krugman recently noted that you cannot sue a global sentiment. You cannot send the military to force a consumer in Paris, Tokyo, or Sao Paulo to buy an American-made product or hold an American treasury bill. This is asymmetric economic warfare, and it is the most dangerous kind because there is no central command to negotiate. With it is a decentralized grassroots rejection of the current administration's trade posture. We are seeing the Make America Go Away movement transition from a viral hashtag into a hard economic reality that is currently wiping billions off the balance sheets of our most iconic companies. The arrogance of assuming the world had no alternative has led us to this precipice. Now the alternative has arrived, and it is priced in gold, yuan, and digital assets that the Federal Reserve cannot control or manipulate. Consider the historical context. Every empire in history has fallen not because of a single battle, but because they lost the ability to project economic reliability. From the Roman denarius to the British pound, the pattern is identical. First comes the overreach, then the weaponization of the currency, and finally the global pivot to a new standard. We are in the pivot phase. The psychological shock of seeing the world's policemen being treated as a global pariah is something many Americans are not prepared for. It challenges our core identity. It forces us to ask, what are we if we are not the leaders of the global order? The answer being provided by the markets is harsh. We are just another over-leveraged nation struggling to maintain its dignity in the face of self-inflicted wounds. This isn't just about the current occupant of the White House. It's about a systemic failure to recognize that in a connected world, isolation is a form of economic suicide. The trillion-dollar mistake was thinking we could go it alone and still enjoy the benefits of a globalized world. The fragmentation of the global trade network is no longer a theory discussed in ivory towers. It is happening at your local grocery store and in your 401,000. The backlash is unstoppable because it is based on the fundamental law of supply and demand. The world is demanding stability, and the United States, under its current trajectory, is supplying only volatility and unpredictable policy shifts. Trump's team is reportedly in a state of internal panic, looking for legal loopholes to stop the bleeding. But how do you stop a billion people from simply choosing to look elsewhere? You can't. The soft power deficit we are facing right now is actually larger than our national debt, and that is a terrifying realization. We are watching the ghost town effect hit our international terminals and our shipping lanes. This isn't just about politics anymore. It's about the very survival of the American middle-class lifestyle, which has been subsidized by global dollar dominance for nearly 80 years. That subsidy has just been revoked by the rest of the world. Imagine the impact on everyday goods, the electronics, the medicines, the components for your car. All of these are part of a global ecosystem. When that ecosystem rejects you, the price of everything goes up while the value of your dollar goes down. This is the squeeze that destroys middle classes. We've seen it in other countries. But we never thought it could happen here. We thought we were immune to the laws of economic gravity. The trillion-dollar mistake has proven that gravity is very real. The internal reports from the Treasury Department are supposedly leaking a grim forecast. A 15% drop in GDP over the next 24 months if the global boycott isn't broken. But how do you break a boycott that has no leader? You can't sign a treaty with 1 billion angry consumers. You can't use an executive order to make a foreign pension fund by your debt. We are witnessing the limits of executive power in a world driven by digital speed and collective sentiment. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction, but in geopolitics, the reaction is often magnified by years of suppressed resentment. The trillion-dollar mistake was believing that the world's reliance on the dollar was a permanent state of nature rather than a fragile consensus built on mutual benefit. That consensus is dead. We are seeing the rise of parallel systems, new payment rails like the BRICS Pay, new trade blocs, and new alliances that specifically exclude the United States from the conversation. This isn't just a trade war. It's a trade divorce. And in this divorce, the United States is the one losing the house, the car, and the kids. The psychological impact on the American worker is going to be immense as the cost of living spikes, not because of traditional inflation, but because of isolation. When you are no longer the world's preferred customer, you pay the outcast premium. On everything you import, this is the hidden tax of the global backlash, and it is going to hit every single American household by the end of this fiscal quarter. Think of the historical precedents, such as the Suez Crisis for the British Empire. It was the moment they realized their global dominance was over. This trillion-dollar mistake is our Suez. It is the moment the facade of total control falls away, revealing a nation that has forgotten how to produce more than it consumes, the global. Backlash is the market's way of forcing us to live within our means, and that process is going to be incredibly painful for a population raised on the idea of infinite credit. The unstoppable nature of this backlash comes from its moral weight. For many around the world, this is a fight for economic sovereignty against what they perceive as American financial bullying. Whether that perception is fair or not is irrelevant. The economic consequence is the same. Capital is flowing to where it is treated best, and right now that isn't the United States. We are seeing the largest reallocation of wealth in human history, moving from the West to the East and the South, leaving the American dream as an expensive relic of a bygone era. Investors need to wake up and look past the daily headlines and the distracting political theater. The underlying structure of the global economy is being rewired as we speak. We are moving from a unipolar financial world to a fragmented one, where made in the USA is becoming a liability for international distributors and retail giants. This is why the panic in the White House is so palpable behind closed doors. They realized too late that the global economy is a complex, living web, not a series of binary deals that can be won or lost in a boardroom. You cannot pull one thread of international cooperation without unraveling the whole tapestry of global prosperity. The leaked videos of diplomats and trade ministers expressing their absolute disdain for the current path aren't just gossip. They are the preamble to a new world order where the U.S. is a spectator rather than the director. The trillion-dollar mistake is the realization that once you lose the moral and economic high ground, the climb back up takes generations, not election cycles. We are seeing major sovereign wealth funds, once the biggest buyers of U.S. debt, quietly pivoting toward basket currencies and hard commodities. This shift reduces the demand for dollars, which in turn devalues everything you own in dollar terms. Your savings, your home equity, your future purchasing power, all of it is tied to the dollar's status as the global reserve. If that status is lost, the American way of life becomes an impossibility for the vast majority of our citizens. The data shows that we are approaching a tipping point where the exit from the dollar becomes a self-reinforcing loop. The more the dollar drops, the more people want to sell it, causing it to drop further. This is the nightmare scenario for any central bank, and we are staring it right in the face because of a series of strategic blunders that prioritized short-term political wins over long-term financial stability. We must ask ourselves, what comes next? If the current administration cannot bridge the gap with our former allies, we are looking at a sustained period of stagnation and decline. The ballroom from hell and the Greenland hoax were symptoms of a deeper rot, but this global backlash is the final diagnosis of a systemic failure. We are seeing states like California and New York already trying to open their own diplomatic backdoors to Europe and Asia, trying to save their local economies from the federal fallout. This is the beginning of a domestic fragmentation that mirrors the global one. If the federal government can't protect our trade interests and maintain the value of our currency, the states will take matters into their own hands to prevent a total social collapse. This is the stress test of our century. Can the republic survive its own isolation? The data says the odds are stacked against us unless a massive, radical shift in policy occurs within the next 72 hours. We are seeing the balkanization of American finance, where different regions are looking for their own ways to hedge against Washington's mistakes. This creates an internal tension that hasn't been seen since the mid-19th century. The global backlash has exposed the fragility of our internal unity. When the prizes of the global empire stop flowing in, the different factions of the country start fighting over the shrinking remains. This is the social cost of the trillion-dollar mistake. It turns a proud nation inward, looking for someone to blame for the fact that the rest of the world has moved on. The reality is that we are all in this together, and the economic pain will not distinguish between political affiliations. The cost of a gallon of milk or a liter of fuel doesn't care who you voted for. It only cares about the strength of the currency in your pocket, and right now that currency is losing its strength at a rate that should terrify every single person listening to this. As we conclude this urgent analysis, I want you to reflect on your own preparedness. We are in uncharted waters, and the old maps are useless for navigating this new reality. The world has moved on, and the trillion-dollar mistake is a debt that we will all be paying for years to come. Stay safe, stay liquid, and most importantly, stay informed. If you found this analysis helpful, please share it with one person you care about. We need to wake as many people up as possible before the door finally closes on our opportunity to prepare. Thank you for your time, for your trust, and for being part of this community. I will continue to monitor the live feeds, the bond markets, and the diplomatic cables and bring you the truth as it unfolds without the filter of the mainstream media. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. The sheriff isn't just at the door of the White House. He is at the door of the global economy, and he is here to collect on a debt of arrogance and fiscal irresponsibility. We are entering a season of accountability, and only those who are clear-eyed about the facts will survive the transition. Remember, knowledge isn't just power in this economy, it is survival. We are witnessing the final chapters of a specific era of American history. What we write in the next chapter depends entirely on our ability to face these harsh truths today. Don't wait for the evening news to tell you what happened. By then, it will be too late to act. Look at the charts, watch the movements of the global elite, and prepare your household for a world where the dollar is no longer king. This is the reality of the trillion-dollar mistake, and the backlash is truly unstoppable. Good night and stay vigilant.